the aha curve and transformation. Portions of this is also included in the transformation slide deck. And so, but I'm not going to pull those slides over to here because I have some additional slides here that aren't included in the transformation slide deck. So they'll be close, but they're not going to be exactly the same. The leadership takeaways for this video include the 4 lenses on transformation as far as what we're going to look at it with the aha curve, okay? Individual, team, product, and organization, and all the other parts of the organization that go with both of those last two. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the law of averages. This was a real eye-opener for me probably a decade ago, even longer. I've been doing program management for almost 20 years. So when I had the realization that on the average we'll be okay, on the average we're going to be able to deliver, you only have to go a little bit above the average to be able to double your team's productivity. And you don't even need everybody with, okay? And I will chat about that in these slides. We can use the AHA curve to measure team progress towards sustainable high performance. This is another measure that we use. And remember, you can't transform just one of the 4 lenses without impacting the other 3. So it's really imperative for all the leadership to understand this and what the leadership's role is in enabling a true transformation to take place. There are questions, brutal questions that the leaders need to ask themselves. And if they're not able to confront the brutal facts and manage from there, doing a really good transformation is going to be a challenge. The pictures that we have in this series, in this section, were commissioned by Ted maybe 5 years ago or so. And we needed pictures to sort of represent what it is that people want and expect. And when we're looking at Agile, if you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, your leadership is expecting that you are able to part the water and help the team cross over the river on dry ground to the other side while being pursued by an army that wants to kill you. And so we look at this through 4 lenses, but basically there are extremely high expectations on Agile, and Agile done correctly will part the waters for you. And you'll be able to do some amazing things and deliver some remarkable results that your leaders will step back and go, whoa, whoa, what was that? Oh, wow, that was awesome. How did you do that? So this is just one of the things of the 4 pictures. There's also, what our kids think that we do, or our moms, and then we're going to look at this plate spinner and then the super agilist. Okay, and so those are the 4 pictures in this series, and we use those in juxtaposition with some of our concepts like the aha curve and the 4 lenses on transformation. And when you're plate spinning, that means you have to do the transformation in all 4 boxes at the same time. But I think you get the idea. These are the 4 lenses on transformation. I talk about these extensively in all of the other presentations and videos that we've done. And it comes from Agile Coaching Institute. This is a modification of what they were working with, and I was inspired by them. And I like how this works. It's individual, team, product, program, process, corner, and then portfolio in the organization corner as well. And this is how we view all of the many, many areas that you need to do, whether it's transformation, whether it's scaling, whether it's rolling out Agile to your organization, or even governing Agile. You'll see various pictures throughout all of our presentations, and this 4-box is one of the key ways that I use to communicate. Here's the 4 major areas that you've got to do everything in, and you need to keep parting the waters for your individuals, for your teams, for the products, programs, processes, for the portfolios, and even for your executives. And so, in a sense, there is this expectation of you need to really be able to, part the waters. I don't know if you saw the movie Bruce Almighty, where he parts the water in the bowl. And, well, you got to start somewhere. Okay. And so it takes battle scars and skill in all 4 of these areas in order to be successful, whether it's just doing Agile or being Agile. Doing is the tool set view, being is the mindset view and how to be Agile. The second picture in this series is what our moms expect of us. And I don't think any of our spouses would agree that we're necessarily having a halo. But the whole point with this one is that you need to not just talk the talk, you have to walk the talk. And coming up the transformation curve, you don't become a saint overnight, okay? I don't know how many of you come from a Catholic background, but to become a saint requires a high level of verification, and you have to go through a whole bunch of hoops in order to be declared a saint. And going up the aha curve is almost the same idea, where in the beginning you're struggling with the ideas, and then you'll be going through the motions or sort of doing Agile. At some point you're going to hit that aha and switch over to being able to perform. And so this is a transformation journey. And I think not only is this what every mom wants for their children, it's what every boss wants for their employees, to be able to have that level of personal transformation in their daily work. The aha curve is something that I put together out of exasperation when I was working in Stockholm back in about 2015. And the slides after this will help explain why I was getting exasperated. I was working with consultants, and they didn't understand bell curves, apparently. And like I said, I was a little exasperated. I just went up to the whiteboard, thought for a second, and drew this picture and said, look, you got people who are struggling, people who are going through the motions. You get to this point where they get to aha, and then they start to perform. And ultimately, through good coaching and mentoring, you'll get them to high performance. And I walked them through the difference between what I meant for hands-on and hands-off. And please understand, hands-on does not mean micromanagement. And if you have confused it for micromanagement, you have misunderstood drastically what we've been trying to teach you. Now, that doesn't mean it won't happen and that people won't fall back into their comfort zones, but the Scrum Master, the Agile Coach, the Enterprise Agile Coach should at least raise the issue and say, hey, well, you're saying micromanagement. What's your plan, Mr. or Miss or Mrs. Scrum Master to get the team back on track and to have the stakeholders or the product owner to have them stop micromanaging. Okay? Or if it's the Scrum Master themselves, then you take them out back to the woodshed, have a come to Jesus meeting, and then let them come back in the building, maybe. So, one way or the other, you need to be able to understand. Hands-on does not mean micromanagement, and hands-off does not mean laissez-faire, do whatever you want. Okay? So, and it's the same for top-down, bottom-up. The agile purists prefer only the organic bottom-up way of scaling agile. I believe that there needs to be a top-down as well as a bottom-up approach. Here's the original bell curve that I had done. And I was just sort of looking at the difference between struggling teams and individuals and high-performing teams and individuals. And at one of the companies that I worked with, when I got there January 3rd or 4th, whenever it was, 2011, in the previous year they had been able to deliver 58 projects. And the teams, when we interviewed the team leads and found out where they were at, it was roughly a 50-50 sprint or split on who was struggling and who felt that they were actually performing, let alone high performing. And so struggling and high performing, those are the outliers, and going through the motions and performing are closer to the center line. Now, on the average, we didn't move everybody up the curve, okay? We got maybe half a dozen of the teams out of the 18 teams to actually show some movement and move to the next highest level of performance. But even that small movement over a couple year period of time, so by 2013, we're talking 2011, 12, and 13. By 2/3 of the way through the year in 2013, the teams were on track to deliver 124 projects per year with 10% less people. So we went from 250 down to about 225, 220, something like that. And the leadership of the organization decided not to replace almost any, well, maybe they replaced some, but we went down by about 10%. So if we lost 15% of the people, they only replaced, 3, 4, 5% of them. So we did more with less, and it took 2 years to get there, or 2.5 years to get there, to start delivering at that velocity. Now the teams were dedicated, persistent teams, and instead of assigning the team members to projects, we reversed it and had the projects assigned to the teams. So these teams had been working together, most of them by this time, for at least a couple of years. So the same thing in using the AHA curve, it's the same thing. I think we had 2 teams that were struggling, and we got one of the teams to move up to going through the motions. And of the going through the motions team, or we reduced it from 2 to 1. So we got one of the teams to go up. And on the motions team, we reduced it from 7 to 5. So 2 of the teams went up to performing. On the performing, we went up to 9, and the high performing, they went up by 1. It was something like that. And so the AHA curve moved over to the left, and we had more teams that were on the right than on the left. So you don't have to have everybody with, okay? And it's the same idea for any kind of transformation that you're going to do. This is still valid. You don't have to have everybody with, in order to be able to do the transformation. You only need a portion of the people width to get exponential doubled results within a relatively short period of time when you look at the big scheme of things. So this was, for me, a powerful aha, because it's both the law of averages and the flaw of averages, okay? And there's a lot of people who have done a lot of presentations on the flaw of averages, but if you understand the power of the law of averages, especially when you're working from the program level and up, you'll go a long way and you'll add tremendous value to the organization with which you are working. This is one of my favorite pictures of the 4 pictures in this series. It's like the plate spinner at the circus, and you have all of these competing demands that you have to balance, and you have to keep the plate spinning. You need to keep your sponsors happy, your vendors happy, the CEO, the CFO, your team, the customer, all the stakeholders. And this is actually what you have to do to achieve flow. And this plate spinning occurs at the individual level, it occurs at the team level, it occurs at the product program process level, it occurs at the portfolio and executive levels. Everybody's spinning a ton of plates. And so you want to keep those plates spinning. You want to be able to effectively manage each of these areas and develop the critical mass that you need in order to succeed. And so the next slide on doing the aha curve in all 4 boxes helps you understand a little bit better the idea of these plates. And in fact, the 4-hour presentation that I have for on using flow to do transformations, or transforming using flow. That 4 hours of presentation is 17 plates that you have to keep spinning in order to successfully transform, scale, roll out, and govern an agile organization, especially if you're coming over from a traditional or classic background and moving towards agile. So this is a really good picture for that. And as I shared in the transformation slide deck, the reason that the journey is long is because you have to go through individual transformations, team transformations, transformations for the product, program, process, line management area, and transformations for the portfolio level and up to the directors and VPs and executives and C-level that are leading the organization. And so transformations take time. And you can score the transformations as the teams are going along. So you could have the individual team members vote where they're at, do an aggregate score like we did in the team box that represents all the votes above in the individual area. I showed a real picture of this in the transformation slides, so we know that this works. The product owner felt that they were still barely going through the motions and felt that it was zombie agile. And we, as the consultants, we had scored the organization at somewhere between struggling or scrumbling, as one of our participants from one of our customers coined the phrase. That was awesome, by the way. They were, struggling, and we put them somewhere between struggling and going through the motions. And going through the motions can end up looking like and feeling like zombie agile, where everybody's just sort of walking with their arms outstretched and they're battered, bloodied, and bruised. And looking like zombies, going, this isn't fun. So it's really important to know and to track and to, over time, be able to give trend lines. How are our teams moving up the curve? It's going to take you anywhere from 5 to 7 years to do a complete transformation if what is taught in the literature and in the journal articles is true. And this picture here is a pretty good explanation of why that's the case. Okay, it's going to take a ton of time. Now, using the principles of flow and showing what I showed on the previous slides on how the teams had moved up the curve relatively quickly, you can see that it's possible to cut that time in half. So we had transformed a 250 person organization in a 2.5 year period of time. And guess what? That also scales. Because if you can do it with 250, you can do it with 2,500, you can do it with 25,000. There are ways to scale up to larger sizes and get that kind of transformation across the board. But the executives and the leadership have to be willing to go on the journey themselves and demonstrate great leadership, and be willing to invest in the time and the effort that it's going to take to get everybody up the curve. As I really hammer home in the transformation video series, it is impossible to do a change in only one of these 4 areas without impacting the other 3. In other words, if you're going to do any kind of change effort, any kind of transformation, whatever, if you're doing a transformation in the product area or the program area, and you're not doing it with the individuals, teams, and the rest of the organization, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, if you want to succeed and do it right, you need to do the change and transformation in all 4 boxes at the same time. And a lot of organizations will be, oh, whoa, 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 we can't do that. We're 150,000 people. Well, don't do it by 150,000. Figure out which divisions that you can do where it makes sense, like Ericsson did. They did their R&D division. They did a transformation 10 years ago, and it's still going. And so external consultants helped Ericsson build their internal capacity to be able to not only deliver the transformation, but to sustain the transformation and make it sustainable. This last picture in the series really reflects everything that you have to be able to do in order to be able to break through the silos, break through the organizational barriers and blockers and impediments that you're going to run into. You need to be a battle-scarred, experienced individual in order to be able to do this at every level in the organization. And so we reflect that in the next slide, the key leadership tools used by each of the 4 lenses. So in the individual box, you'll see that we use the 4R model primarily, but we also use the 4D model there. We use VSBT. We use the flow friction analysis even there. And so there's a ton of tools that we use, but these are primary. In the team and product program process boxes or lenses, we use the 4D model, the define, distill, deliver, and drive, because we're working with groups and teams and programs and portfolios of individuals. And so we'll use those, and you still use the 4R with each of the people individually, but we also use primarily 4D with the teams. We shift our focus up to the team level. And then up in the organization box, we have the infinity symbol where it's when to wear which hat. The agile purists will say, oh, well, managers, they're the root of all evil, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The reality is that's just simply not true. The reality is that as a really good enterprise level agile coach and mentor and trainer, you need to know when to wear your agile hat and when to wear your management consulting hat. And if you don't have any management consulting skills, you are going to get wiped out. You need to understand that when you get into those upper layers, they speak a different language. They speak the language of leadership, not the language of management. And there's politics there. And that level of politics is a blood sport. Ted and I used to joke about, hey, it's like the octagon in the MMA world of mixed martial arts, where you throw two people in the ring and one person walks out of the ring more or less alive, and the other one, well, maybe or maybe not. And so politics is a blood sport, and if you're going to be able to work and move in those areas, you need to understand the language, you need to know when to wear which hat, and it's really important to be able to have all of the skills together in a complete package. And so it really does put a huge level of requirements on you. And using flow, we can help you achieve superhero status and help deliver results to the leadership where they say, oh, wow, that was great. How did you do that? And so this is what it's all about. And we'll go through a little bit more of the key leadership tools by Lens in the next slide. So here's the key leadership tools that I would use by Lens, the primary ones. For the individual, you'll see that it's the 4R model with right truth, right values, attitudes, right actions, right results, with the individual's vision and their spirit in the center. For the Agile team, for them, I would use primarily the 4D model and overlay that over Scrum, Agile, Lean, Kanban, whatever they're doing, in order to raise it to higher levels of performance. The same thing for the product, program, process box up there in the upper right. I would do the exact same thing with them using the 4D model. And for the enterprise level, I would be using both hats in dealing with the executives, both helping them come up the agile consulting curve and helping them build operational excellence into the agile organization that they're building. So that at the point when they get to the point there where they need to do creative destruction, they actually have the tools in their hand for all of the boxes to be able to go, okay, here's where we need to make a decision point. Here are the trends. Here's what's happening. And this is the direction that we should go. And if we have all these parts in place, you have a pretty good chance of having a successful rollout, a successful scaling, a successful transformation, and hopefully even a successful way to start to govern an agile organization as they're transforming from the traditional classic waterfall style over into an agile lean type of organization. This section was a long one. It's one of the longer ones in the training series, but I didn't feel it was really good to break these up into separate videos at this point in time. We went through the 4 lenses on transformation, how to use the AHA curve with that. We looked at the law of averages and how to use the AHA curve to actually measure a team and their progress towards sustainable high performance. In the beginning, we would measure this monthly, and then we would switch to quarterly after that, once we have a good feel for where the team is at. And you can even go up a level and do like reporting on multiple teams once you have the average score for each team. And that just sort of gives you an idea if your program or portfolio which would be a grouping of projects and or programs, if all of those are moving the right direction. So the application for this is think about what tools you'll need to use for transformation, for scaling, and for rolling out. I get into this much more in the transformation slides. It's another 4 hours of content and video. Yeah, I know, that's brutal. It's another 4 hours, and that's done at the Flow Certified Coach level. So, the tools I use in doing a good transformation for the individual, the AHA curve and the 4R model; at the team, AHA curve 4D model and the team health check; for the product, the AHA curve again, 4D model, team health check. And these are really powerful for retrospectives in the product development process. And then at the organization level, we use the AHA curve, 4D model, team health check, and infinity curve that you may have already seen. And these are vital feedback for the leadership from the teams, and hopefully in a one thing format.